Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. So we're at the end of another year. This has been a really busy year for the podcast. Hope it's been a really busy year for you. And I thought we would do something different, something we haven't done for the past 3 years, something that's actually been requested by a few people. So we're going to do some reflections. You know, it's the end of 2023 and there's a new year rolling straight on around. With a new year comes that sense of new beginning for a lot of us. Look into the future, time to think about stuff, a space to reflect. How's the year gone? What did I intend to do? What did I do? It can be a very helpful part for all of us, including myself. And do you ever really do it? So here is a few things that I have learned over this past year of the podcast. Some stuff I've picked up from a lot of guests, some of my favorite quotes and what they mean to me, and some book recommendations. We get asked a lot for book recommendations. What am I reading? I reference stuff on the podcast quite a lot. So I'm going to be speaking about a book that I read every year. I think I've read this book, obviously not every year forever. I would say I've at least read it for the last 5 years. And every time I read it, it makes me think I am not doing what I should have been doing, and it kind of helps recalibrate me. So the book we're going to be looking at as well is Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield, a book that was recommended to me probably back in 2019. So probably only talking 4 years. I've read it now. Very useful. So we're going to be going into a little bit of that. Hope you find it useful. Hope you find it enjoyable. Hopefully there's something here for you. So let's kick it off. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. So this year we actually released our 300th episode, which is weird and surreal considering we're only really supposed to do one a week, and we've only been doing it 3 years, so you should assume we would only have around 160 or so episodes, but in fact we do a lot more. It's my personal opinion you should always seek to do more than you're paid to do. I always say to people, work twice as hard on yourself as you do on the job, and over-promising and under-delivering is just something that viscerally disagrees with me. You know, I've learned this lesson from doing it wrong a lot of times, and if you can set a cadence, if you can set a tempo that you believe is sustainable for you, then whenever you go over and above that, that is fantastic. And realistically, the pass mark in life these days is very low, especially in the emergency services. I have found myself that you can driftwood through your entire career. It's something I certainly don't seek to do, but it's something I have seen a lot of, and perhaps people who will listen to this might agree, because if you listen to this, you are probably the sort of person that goes over and above in what you do. You're passionate about it. For God's sake, you are listening to something in your private time that is called the Firefighters Podcast. How sad of you. But that means you want to improve yourself. You want to get better. You're looking for the 1% gain. So that's something we've tried to continue to do. Set a cadence that is realistic for us within the podcast world. That is 1 episode per week. And then over and above that, we just go full hog. We try and deliver as much value as possible, and we constantly feel ourselves with guilt because we feel like we're not doing enough because there's so many incredible people out there. Anyway, that's point number 1. Next, I want to talk about overcoming resistance and the imposter syndrome. Now, this is something that I think gets spoken about way too much, so I'm not going to drag my heels through the imposter syndrome, but that aspect of resistance and stopping yourself from doing something that is uniquely you. We were all given one thing, that we have a hybrid gift of which we can deliver. Maybe you have a little bit of an entrepreneurial itch. Maybe you're slightly an artist. Maybe you're quirky. Maybe you're a little bit weird. You have something that you can deliver that no one else can do. And if you don't do it, no one else is going to do it. Firefighters Podcast is an example of that. Many people could do this, would do it, but would do it differently. They would do their version of it. A lot of our guests this year, Amy being one of the most recent examples, and it also tends to be a correlating factor with a lot of female guests, but not always the case. People stop themselves before they've even started. They put barriers in place before they even begin. We are fantastic salespeople. We tell ourselves that we cannot do it, that we are rubbish, that we shouldn't be the person doing it. There are far more qualified people that should be doing it, could be doing it, and we will likely fuck it up. We'll look stupid. Everyone will laugh. We shouldn't be the person putting ourselves forward to do this. And as a result, everyone loses. When the rest of you, all of you, every single part of you doesn't show up in your life, in your work, in your family, everyone collectively loses. And often this is because of that internal resistance. I have found this many, many, many times. I struggle personally when it comes to putting the podcast out. Sometimes I have to listen back to myself, which is a great self-awareness piece, but it also means that you hate yourself quite a lot because it could be done a lot better. There is people that could do this a lot better than me, but sometimes you've got to go with what you've got as well. In other news, this episode is brought to you in partnership with MSA Safety. Today we have them to thank for the improved firefighter safety through connectivity in their brand new connected firefighter system. At the center of the connected firefighter platform is the MSA M1 SCBA with telemetry. You can view battery life, air pressure, and estimated time remaining either independently on the M1 itself or from the Luna connected device screen. Also, still with the air status, alarm information, search status, and all of this provided to the incident command for confident decision making during the scene. That integrates straight in with the Luna system, which is a wireless all-in-one device creating an independent search and rescue network, providing edge detection, enhanced personal thermal imaging, while simplifying post-scene reporting and data retention. One of the key parts of the Luna is their FAST system, the Firefighting Assisting Search Technology. This combines directional and distance information with thermal imaging to help find separated teammates and decrease response time. It actually connects you to the other crews in the vicinity for a unified search during the time of mutual aid by instantly notifying the network of Luna devices when there is a downed crew member, allowing for a prompt search and rescue. All of this then plugs into the FireGrid system for cloud-based connectivity, real-time information, and data-driven decisions for the incident commander. It enables you to see the exact location of your firefighters on the scene. And it doesn't require you to be sat on the station. The MSA Hub then provides a wireless gateway straight to the cloud, enabling wireless on-scene data for local and remote incident command for additional eyes on the scene. MSA are truly taking massive strides in the future of improved firefighter safety through connectivity. MSA is dedicated to increasing safety in the fire service through technological advancements. Various feature enhancements, new products, partnerships, and integrations will provide additional capabilities readily accessible by products, software, and services in the brand new MSA Connected Firefighter platform. Now back to the show. Next thing I wanted to talk about is also closely correlated to the podcast, and the reason I stopped doing other business ventures and stopped doing other things. If you've listened to the podcast for a little while, you'll know I used to have gyms and a travel company and a catering company and a cleaning company and other things, and I did a lot of coaching as well. I stopped doing all of that and I went full hog into communication, into learning more about people, because I was doing lots of things poorly and I wanted to do less things and do them well. And being part of the emergency services has always been a real privilege for me. It's one of the main driving purposes of creating the podcast. But of course, it doesn't make money. The thing we do, the podcast, yes, you'll see we have partners, we have sponsors, stuff like that. It doesn't really make any money. It all goes back into it. We get invited to a lot of cool places. So, of course, it is affording us nice things in life, myself and members of the team. But we don't take a wage from it. It doesn't make any money. And being part of the emergency services is a wider context for that. Yes, we all get paid, but it isn't just about the income. It's more about the outcome. It's something you've probably heard me say many times on the podcast before. It's about what are you contributing to? What is the purpose that you serve? What is the purpose that we serve? What is it we're doing? What's happening both personally and professionally? And what is this act of service making of you? It's less about what you're doing and more about what are you becoming. And the podcast for me has been a tremendous self-education. It's like the best university I could have ever asked for. I feel like I am at least participating in it on a regular basis. I'm showing up. I feel I fail regularly in the fact that I don't have the requisite knowledge to be able to have the greatest conversations with these individuals, and the individuals and guests that come on are very kind. But ask yourself, in the things that you're doing, are you just doing them for the title? Are you just doing them for the money? Are you just doing them because you think it's what you should do, or what people expect of you, or what was the next logical thing to do in your career or your life, be that marriage or promotion or whatever? Think more about what are you becoming, not what are you doing. Are you enjoying the thing that you are actually part of? I read and saw some great statistics recently, the sort of echoes on that value of association, which might be something that we speak about a little bit in our future. And it speaks about the people and the places and the times that you spend with things. And I mean, for co-workers, the time that we spend with them, I think, is on average 5 hours a day when we come into our 20s to our mid-20s. I mean, when you're very early on, of course, you spend no time. And then on the graph that I remember looking at, in fact, I've got it in front of me now, you start in, when you're 16, 17, starting on 2 hours a day working with the people that you work with, and that spikes right up. And I don't actually think this captures data from like the emergency services where you're spending 12-hour shifts, if not more, with people on a regular basis. This is a steady increase of time. We often say that you spend more time with the people that you work with than you perhaps do your loved ones. So think about, who are you spending that time with? The thing that you're doing, what is it making of you? Lie down with dogs, wake up with fleas, hug enough chimney sweeps, you're going to get some soot on you. Don't pretend that the people that you work with are not having an impact on you. They're having a tremendous impact on you. You need to stand guard at the door of your life and the door of your mind. What is getting in there? What is pushing itself into your head? This was, again, another reason for the podcast. I was having these conversations with people long before we ever started the podcast. It was my desire to put myself around people far more intelligent than me, in far better positions in life in terms of things perhaps they have achieved or an endeavor they are pursuing. Passionate people who are doing things for good reasons, and I find them tremendously inspirational. So find a way to put yourself around people who will make more of you and less about the thing you're doing versus what is it making of you. Next up is something I speak about regularly in the podcast, which is don't let perfect be the enemy of good. One thing I really like about the podcast is every week it must go out. It is going out every single week. There is no, it's not quite there yet, it's not quite perfect, let's push it back. This is part of a cadence, and it's also a great aspect of accountability for me. Public accountability works well for some people. Put a post out on social media, let people know that you're going for a 5k run. Afterwards, hopefully someone will say, dude, have you been for the 5k run? No, I didn't. I suck. Tell your friends on watch. Tell your children. Tell people that you're going to do something. Again, we're coming on the crest of a new year. What are you doing? What are you actually working towards? Are you actually actively going to tell anybody about it? Because if you don't tell anyone and you don't do it, no one's going to fucking know. And you can just sit in your bed at night and lie to yourself and no one will ever even know. So that's a lovely little secret that you will just have to cry about and feel deflated about. But actually giving yourself that bit of accountability really helps. And the podcast does really help that with me. It forces me to, I'm having a conversation with so-and-so this weekend. I need to know something about that. I need to have a look. I need to make sure I get that data done. I need to make sure I get that prep done. And then a day later, 2 days later, an episode needs to go out every Monday. It is going out. Is it perfect? No. Could the audio be better? Yes. Did I ask all the right questions? No. Don't let great be the enemy of good. A lot of what you're doing is good. You could do many things very well, but because you're not going to do them great first time, you don't even start doing them. Most people will never be great because they daren't be shit. They daren't start and look rubbish and embarrass themselves. And this gets harder as we get older as well, because there's almost an expectation that when you're in your late 20s, 30s, certainly in your 40s and 50s, when you've still got the best part of 40 years left to kick ass, take names, and do the best version of yourself, people have this illusion that we should be a grown-up by now. We have got some sort of requisite knowledge. We should be perceived to be a professional, and we can't start something new where we would look stupid, where we would look like we are not a consummate professional, like we haven't got our life together, like we can't operate competently, and that restricts us so often from doing anything at all. So have that in your mind when you're going into the next year. Don't let great be the enemy of good. What could you do tomorrow that you would be okay at? And with the marginal gains and compound interest of daily practice and the 10,000 hour rule, for people that are familiar with that, go and have a look. Again, we'll reference this in the books for the notes. Go and get better at it. Next up, being an energy multiplier. Now, we speak to individuals from the military every now and again, and they talk about being a force multiplier. Basically, in my limited interpretation, there is very few of them in these special forces teams, and they must 1 + 1 needs to equal 5. 1 + 1 cannot equal 2. And when you ask yourself, is your presence something that multiplies the energy in the room? Can you bounce off people like an atom and create additional energy? Are you a 1 + 1 = 5? Are you a radiator or a drain? Does the room get brighter when you leave? Think about that. Think about the effect you're having on the people around you. We spend a lot of time with our colleagues in the emergency services. Are you bringing good energy to this space, or are you draining energy from other people? Because it makes a huge difference. So think about that. Ask yourself, are you bringing energy? And I suppose that also brings to mind a quote from Marcus Luttrell. Marcus Luttrell was a guy that they based the film of Lone Survivor on. If you've seen that, Mark Wahlberg, I think, was the actor in the film. Marcus Luttrell was on many podcasts that I've heard, and he said something that said, we're all stones. Some beat you, some dull you out, and others can sharpen you into a blade. Which are you, and what stones have you put around you? I think that's a great articulation of the value of association and the people that you're placing around you. Are you dull? Are you dulling other people? Or are you pushing each other? Are you holding each other accountable? If we step up in the gym together and we happen to both walk in there at the same time, are you going to push me? Are you going to sharpen me? Am I going to leave this environment and this conversation feeling like it's been of benefit? Have I got more than an hour's worth in return that I can contemplate, that I can build on, that is going to make me reflect and develop myself? Or am I counting the seconds until our conversation ends? Moving on from that and leaving surplus in the tank kind of echoes back to that, not letting great be the enemy of good. Most people, when they do that, they don't give everything that they have within them. And do you want your tombstone to read surplus? Do you want there to be excess energy in the tank when you get to the end? What makes death so hard for so many people, I think, is unsatisfied curiosity, the thing that they never did. They were too busy doing, there's a great book, Words of the Dying, I think it was. And within that, it said that the common most things that people dying say is, I wish I'd have lived my life how I wanted to, not how I thought people wanted me to. You are allowing so much of what you do to be pivoted by someone else who really doesn't give a shit about how your life is going. They're really not bothered, not because they're horrible people, just because they're focused on their own life. Today's podcast is powered by our partner Lifelines and their revolutionary approach to functional hydration. Just like in firefighting, water is essential for body function, but studies show more than 80% of firefighters are dehydrated. A 25-year study findings from the National Institute of Health showed poor hydration to be linked to early aging and chronic disease, and even mild dehydration results in significant negative impact outcomes including headaches, exhaustion, rapid pulse, irritability, and poor cognitive function. A study conducted by Yale University showed that participants who were just 1% dehydrated had a 12% increase in errors when performing tasks that required cognitive flexibility. In addition, dehydration is shown to worsen mood and attitude, contribute to confusion and poor decision making, and negatively affect memory and judgment. In other words, you really don't want your incident commander, firefighter, or for that matter any first responder on a critical scene to be even slightly dehydrated. Mild dehydration occurs when a person is just 1.5% dehydrated, a condition that does not even trigger the thirst response in most people. So just imagine how quickly a firefighter or any first responder can and does become dehydrated in their day-to-day duties, which is why I address my hydration first thing every day with Lifelines. Go into the notes for this episode and specifically check out Lifeline's Hydro Fuel and Hydro OG by clicking in the notes for the podcast for a clean energy solution designed for those who demand more from their day. Now back to the show. Next up, a point on character. This came through with quite a lot of episodes, quite a few retired chief fire officers, but also just retired firefighters in general, is that the emergency services and being an operator within it, I have found, listening to people during their careers and after their careers, it is not just character building, but it's also character revealing. What I mean by this is when we put the uniform on and people see us out there doing the thing, police officer, ambulance worker, firefighter, nurse, whatever you might be, people have a perception of the type of person that you are. There is a auto upload of character traits. We perceive you to be brave. We perceive you to be confident, assertive, well-mannered, with good values. When the shit hits the fan, when the rubber meets the road, when you actually get off the truck at the incident and the thing is actually happening, it is very character revealing. There's a lot going on in the UK Fire and Rescue Service at the minute, certainly with regard to values judgments and perceptions of people's values, and this can force people to act out in ways they wouldn't do ordinarily because they are so very conscious about how they might be being perceived. It's more important to some people now that we are perceived to be doing the right thing versus actually doing the right thing. There's a difference. Even though the outcome might look very similar, the reason behind why you're doing it is very important. So when you're faced with these situations, a difficult conversation with a team member, a difficult conversation with a member of the public, when the time is tight, when the pressure is on, think about the character traits that you would like to exhibit. Think about who you are and the reason that you got into this thing, and operate with that integrity. Secondly, within that, when it comes to character traits, this is a really important thing for me. We don't want cookie-cutter firefighters. A team of first responders should be well-rounded, but the individual members don't need to be. The traditional feel-good interview has a reliable failure rate because we onboard lookalikes that sound alike versus tapping into that, what I think is like a real rich diversity of talents and backgrounds in our services. We need to drive innovation, debate, and overall change that, I suppose, really powers that progress and growth through having different people that aren't perfect. Not looking for everyone to be well-rounded. These quirky, beautiful freaks that find themselves into the realms and the ranks of our emergency services have chosen to do that because they're a bit strange. Let's not bash the strangeness out of them, because that's probably the thing that makes them so great. Next was a small piece on neurodiversity. We've had quite a number of neurodiversity experts, if we can call them that, probably more enthusiasts, on the podcast over the last year. Some really fantastic people. And one of my favourite quotes around that, and something I would love personally to see more in the emergency services, but also just in society in general, it's something we're starting to see a little bit more in the education sector, and members of my family in the teaching profession. And one of them is that as we leave education, the standard education as we think of it, it asks us, how clever are you? We sit a test and we are forced into a narrow column that asks you very specifically, how clever are you? What I really think we need to lean into a lot more is asking, how are you clever? We have many ways to solve these problems. There's many ways to look at things, but certainly when it comes to fundamentals of firefighting as one example, the way that we have a limited bandwidth of teaching, we teach things in typically one way sometimes, unless you're lucky enough to have a really knowledgeable and well-served instructor who has a diverse range of delivery methods. It's something that we can end up losing a lot of fantastic people if we keep focusing on sitting down written tests, narrow bandwidth answers, versus a wider conception of how are people smart, how are they intelligent, how can they add value. The old quote that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its life thinking it's stupid, when really it might just be asked to do the wrong task. It has tremendous value and tremendous speed and agility and adaptability and capability. But if we put people in the wrong environments, if we ask the wrong things of them, we ask them in the wrong ways. It's something that's very close to my heart, given that I am a weirdo and a freak and currently going through diagnosis for other aspects in my life as well. I hope that we can get a little bit more understanding of that. Next is something that's very dear to my heart, because it's something I try to get better at and I fail at consistently on the podcast, which is only use words when you genuinely believe they will outperform silence. So many people are just speaking to fill the void. They say wise men speak when they've got something to say. Fools speak just to say something. Don't fear the silence. Some people need it. Yeah, I found this personally with the podcast, and when I reflect back on conversations, when I am listening in for the intangibles, for the non-physical, emotional, the different cues, the different ways that we show up and give indications in a conversation, silences are appropriate. They add weight, they add pregnancy to points, they give room for thought and reflection. Try and think more before you speak. It's certainly something I'm going to try and get a lot better at as we move into the new year. Next on my list was kind of a reiteration again of this value of association. Surround yourself with people and friends and loved ones who will not tolerate less than the best version of you. People will let you get away with a lot of stuff. They will let you get away with a lot of low output, a lot of low quality you. So as you're moving into the new year, I would ask that you politely encourage people to request the very best of you, to encourage you to bring the best self of you forwards, and also train people how to give you feedback. How do you like to receive feedback? I like it quick, firm, and very often. Giggity. There's also something else going in there. No. That's how I like my feedback. I don't like too much ambiguity. I like people to tell me as it is. I am extraordinarily hard to offend, but please don't put any bad comments at the bottom of this. No, I'm joking. I like it that way. It helps me. That has also come up a cropper, because if I try to give feedback to other people in that way, it doesn't always work well. So train people how you like to receive feedback. Train people how to communicate with you so that they can raise the alarm bell or ring the bell when something is turning up that is not the best version of you. You know when that is. They probably know when it is as well. But if they don't know how to raise the alarm bell, raise the hand, and not trigger you in a polite, this isn't the best version of you, I expect better, you should expect better from yourself. So try and surround yourself with people like that as you move into the new year, or educate the people that are already in your world. I suppose building on from that, it's probably a good one to bring up at this point around passion for the job. Sometimes if you're still showing up at the job and you are coasting, I appreciate that for some people it looks like the golden handcuffs, you're locked in for the pension. But when passion leaves your job, so should you. I think of passion like a pilot light. Now I know I've not been in the job for as many years as you guys and girls may have. Going on 17 years probably now, so kind of in the middle, a long way to go, and passion has its waves, shall we say. You know, your enthusiasm certainly can come and go with the passing of each day, but I have a 3 in a row rule where if I have a bad day 3 times in a row, something's really wrong. I have to have some real serious reflection on my habits, on what I'm doing each day. Yeah, because your passion it should feel like a pilot light for me. You know, it might flicker or divide, but when it's out, you should be as well. Don't become another link in the chain wrapped around the shoulders of today's fire service, weighing down the progress, weighing down necessary change, weighing down innovation. Pass the torch. Keep the dream alive. You know, pass it on to the next generation of firefighters. It's important that if you are mentally checking out, either physically check out and leave, or don't throw salt. You know, don't piss on the enthusiasm of the new recruit, because that's not cool. And you would have been as enthusiastic as them one day. If you don't want to share in all of their optimism and high fives on the daily, drive into work, and when they arrive on the parade line, buzzing with enthusiasm and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, give them space. Yeah? If you don't have that same passion, then just don't piss on theirs. That's all I would ask, because there's a lot of people coming into the fire and rescue service, and it's really important that we give them space and support and encouragement to bring all of their new ideas and energy and enthusiasm. And you've got all the knowledge, all the stuff you say they're rubbish at, it's in your head. So spend time with them and teach it to them. Next, I suppose we could go to, when we're thinking about the way that we speak to other people, the way we give them feedback, we spoke about how we want to receive feedback. When you are feeling triggered, when someone says something that pushes you in the wrong direction, try and remember that your emotional reaction to anything, really, is just the first draft of your thought. It's not permanent ink. You can change it. You can adapt it. It is just the first draft. It is your monkey mind. As Professor Stephen Peters would say, it is that first draft of a thought. It's valid. Some of it is very relevant, but maybe not all of it needs to reach reality. Not all of it needs to manifest itself into words and be delivered in a manner which you can never take back. So try and remember that your emotional reaction is something that is just a first draft. You can change it. Swallow your pride. Rethink it. And think about, what is my desired outcome with this conversation? If your desired outcome is a resolution, and for the two of you to get closer, to reach a place of understanding, have that as your outcome. I always say the same when it comes to my wife, do I want to be right, or do I want to be happy? Do I want to sustain a long-term happy relationship with my partner? Then the desire is not always to be right. There will be opportunities to educate each other, and we should take those. But what's your desired outcome? I think we've run through a lot there. Probably going to look to... Turning Pro. Let's wrap this up with the book recommendation. So Turning Pro. Turning Pro is a book by Stephen Pressfield. The subtext of it is tapping into your inner power and create your life's work. Sounds a bit corny, right? Sounds a bit high five, but if you're still listening at this point, you've probably got an idea that I love a little bit of high five sometimes. But also there's a lot of takeaway here. There's a lot of useful stuff. So according to Stephen Pressfield, life can be divided into two stages: before turning pro and after. After is obviously better. He says that when it comes to turning pro, some of it can be tactical and strategic, and some of it is just an addict like me, bomb bursting and doing a lot of things. But are you busy doing figure eights, or are you busy making progress? The first part of his book describes the addictive nature of the amateur who is lost in their bad habits. And the second part of it paints a vision of what you'd like to be, what you'd like to look like as a pro, and where the amateur falls short. And then the third part of the book is about cultivating professionalism. So some of the things that certainly relate to some of my reflections today, maybe one of the first things that I spoke about was, in the book, there is an aspect that speaks about the amateur, and they define it as the defining trait of the amateur is the fear of being who he or she is and getting rejected for it. I'm on here on the podcast being myself, and it's petrifying, and it's scary, and what will people say, and what have people said? But the worst thing you could be is being successful for someone you are not. Perpetuating a mask that, once you've worn the mask for so long, the mask becomes the person. Think of it like the film The Mask. You just can't rip it off. You become the thing. And inside you, the real you dies. One thing that really stands in the way of a lot of people truly becoming pro, as Stephen Pressfield would say, is the obstacle for the amateur that he or she always chases some guru or authority. This happens a lot these days. At the Instagram and the social media, you can find a new god every single week and find a new person to praise and find a new thing you want to do, and copying that and doing 75 hard or doing monk mode or doing whatever it might be, that is just a copy and paste of someone else. That is not you. That is not what fits your life. Because the third principle of it is all about doing the thing that is interesting to you. When you do your work, the thing you want to get good at, the thing you're passionate about, and you do it for the sake of its practice and nothing else, That's when you turn pro. That's when you start making real traction. The rubber hits the road there. So firstly, let's acknowledge that none of us are born pros. We all start as amateurs, addicted to shadow careers, as Stephen calls them, which we pursue in the lack of guts to chase the real thing we want to do, to chase our real calling. I have put on many masks myself. I've tried on many businesses, and I have finally found something I think I can do forever. I really enjoy the podcast, but again, it is very closely associated to the thing I do professionally as well. So is that a bit of a cop-out? I don't know. Stay tuned. Stephen says that the fear is a primary colour of the amateur's world. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of looking foolish, fear of underachieving, and fear of overachieving. Fear of poverty, fear of loneliness, fear of death. But mostly what we all fear as amateurs is being excluded from the tribe. I.e. the team, the watch, the gang, the family, the posse, mum, dad, family, race, religion, brother, sister, nation, world, all of the above. The amateur fears that if he turns pro and lives out his or her calling, they will have to live up to who they really are and what they are truly capable of. The amateur is terrified that if the tribe should discover who they really are, they'll be kicked out into the cold and they'll die. There is a real fear for people, I think, and I certainly see this in the fire and rescue service, when we say, bring your whole self to work, or be yourself. And then in the next breath we say, no, not like that. Because the idea that the more we become ourselves, the less will be understood, and the fewer people will walk, talk, and act like us is paralyzing. We won't have anyone to connect with. Most people never get out of this incapacitated state of ungrounded fear. People do turn on you when you go rogue, when you go different, when you change, when you stop doing the thing they want you to do, you stop doing the thing with them, you look different, sound different, go different places, stop showing up for the thing that they do. But you'll also find new people who are also discovering themselves. You'll find freaks with their freak flags flying. You can spot them, they're out there, or maybe you can hear them, maybe you're listening to one right now. Nonetheless, for the few who break out of their shell of fear, another roadblock awaits. In the book, he speaks about one major roadblock for amateurs is trying to please gurus, mentors, authorities, and teachers. We see this all of the time in emergency services. The hippo in the room, the highest paid person in the room. That's the hippo. That's the person that lots of people try to please. Once you get over the hump of pressing go on your passion and putting your thing out there, when I was able to start putting podcasts out and worried less about what was my brigade going to do about it or say about it, it was very liberating. But even this episode is the first time we're doing something like this, so this is scary as well, but you should do things that scare you on a regular basis. It's a natural part of the process, and it's damaging because you instantly think that the gurus that you work with would like the new you, would like the thing you're doing. You just ventured into new, uncharted, scary territory, and now you realize there's no clear path ahead. This is untrodden ground. You hang on to anyone's every word who tells you that you have stepped out of the bubble, you stepped out of the normal path, and it's scary. And it's ironically the thing you always wanted to do, but it takes so much just to even start doing it. There's nothing wrong with listening to expert advice. I do it, coaches, mentors, podcasts. But worshipping a teacher, a mentor, even a spouse as an icon takes away your power. It's the singer waiting to be discovered. It's the blogger hoping for the viral post. It's the athlete waiting for their coach's approval. It's the firefighter waiting for the station manager to tell them how amazing they are. All of these stand in the way of you doing work your way. Your mentor's genius, the way they do it, will never fully rub off on you because they are a totally different person. They are doing it their way, and it's probably not even fully their way. They have also got a million fingerprints of everyone else of the way that they're doing it. You've got to choose your way. You've got to choose it for yourself. Thirdly, when we spoke about doing something for the passion of it, Stephen speaks about doing your work for its own sake as a practice. That is what being pro is really about. Stephen, as an example, published his first book when he was 52. 52 years old when he published his first book, and despite writing novels since his late 20s, you'd think by that point any rational person would have quit with exactly that thought in mind. Which is exactly right. Eventually, the professional must commit to him or herself that to an extent that it is beyond reasonable, they should stop doing it. That's something they'll do gladly because, like Stephen, at some point they realise they haven't got the effort to do it anymore. They think they should have done it by now. And I see this a lot with people retiring from services, that they still have so much to give. They still have so much within them because they've probably spent a large portion of their career doing someone else's wishes, growing someone else's thing. They still have so much within them. But now they feel they're in their 40s, 50s or 60s and it's too late for them to do it. For Stephen, he said that in the end he answered the question by realising that he had no choice. He couldn't do anything else. He said, I was enjoying myself. Maybe no one else liked the stuff, but I was doing it. And I enjoyed it. I was learning. I was getting better. And that is so true. That's that 10,000 hour rule sweeping in again. It's at that point that your work turns into practice. If you're really passionate about the emergency services, if you're certainly new into the service, this stuff should be play for you. You should want to get there early. You should want to open up the lockers. You should want to read the things. You should want to listen to a podcast or a YouTube. Not this one, maybe another one, whatever. But you are listening to this one now, so there's obviously some benefit in it. It should be a self-serving ritual that needs no justification. Stephen defines it as a rigorous, prescribed regimen with the intention of elevating the mind and the spirit to a higher level. As such, each practice has a time, a place, and an intention. It's simple, consistent routine that enables you to let quality do its thing. The professional is an external student, always ready to learn, always willing to show up regardless of the weather. This is what allows him or her to practice his craft as long as he needs to until it is a craft that begins to work for him or her in return. Anyway, that is Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield. It's one of my favourites. It's something I read on a regular basis. If you have something that you have always wanted to do, if you are looking at 2024 and you think maybe it's the year where you're actually going to go and do it, it's actually the year you're going to go and do the thing that you keep saying you're going to do, or maybe you've told no one, but you know there is something you want to do, then maybe 2024 is the year. What other books would I suggest you go and read in 2024? Atomic Habits, James Clear. If you haven't read that, it's a must-read for everyone. It's one of my favourites. I think we've actually referenced it a few times in January episodes that have already been recorded. There's a lot of health and well-being ones coming out in January. Atomic Habits is very good. It's about personal development, productivity, habit setting, fundamentals. I think it's a must-read. I think James reads it himself as well. You can get it on Audible. It's just really good for habits. It's loads of explanations on how habits work, why they're important, creating a robust system of how to design your own habits. There's some examples in the book from history, sport, business. It's a really easy read, given the habits. A foundation for everything. We're all habitual creatures. If you think you're not, you are. You probably eat 1 of 5 regular meals every single week anyway. So there's probably many habits that you already have. The way you get up in the morning, the next thing you do, you're a habit-driven creature. So if you can change those habits, tiny changes, remarkable results is the tagline for James's book. An easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. If you have a habit that you want to change, Atomic Habits, that would be a strong recommendation from me. What else? Looking down my Audible list. Never Split the Difference. This was great. So, Negotiating as if your life depended on it. Chris Voss was an ex-lead international kidnapping negotiator for the FBI. He reads the book himself. Really fantastic. Communication skills, negotiation, asking better questions. I actually stole a lot of it to use in the podcast, the way that I communicate with people, the way you ask questions. There was an old book called Getting to Yes, I think it was called, many years ago. Was good-ish for sales, and you could probably recognize a lot of the way that a lot of salespeople were trained in the 70s and 80s, when it basically works on compound effect of yes, where it's like, Pete, are you a bloke? Do you like sunshine? Do you like new cars? do you think it's better if you get more value for your money? They're looking to stack, yes, and then get into it. That's a very simplified, rubbish example of it. But Never Split the Difference is a totally different way of going about it. And it's actually based on real life stuff. The reason I bring up Getting to Yes is because Chris mentions it in the book, and how a lot of people were trained in negotiation. And they said that I forget what he says in the book, it's really good. It was with hostage negotiation, the difference is they have to get 100% success rate. It's not like sales. In sales, if you get 3 out of 10, you're a pro. Do you know what I mean? In hostage negotiation, you have to get everything you want, and they get nothing that they want, and everyone's still happy. Or that you've convinced them that is a logical and good outcome. So definitely a book I would suggest you go and take a look at. Ryan Holiday. Ryan Holiday has got a lot of good stuff out there. I think he's probably got his own reading list, actually. But he definitely has. And I've looked at it before. Picked up many things from it. Ryan, you'll know who Ryan is. He talks a lot about Stoic philosophy. He's got many books, actually. I think he's got 5 or 6 books. The Daily Stoic is his podcast, and he's got a book of the same name, 366 Meditations on Wisdom, Perseverance, and the Art of Living. But I didn't actually know about the Daily Stoic. Firstly, an old friend of mine actually introduced me to The Obstacle is the Way, which is, I think, one of his first books. Probably not. My memory's just failing me. But go and find that one, The Obstacle is the Way. Very useful recommendation for starting with Ryan's work if you don't know who he is and you haven't heard of him before. Great stories from history, sport, politics, explaining and reinforcing lessons of Stoic philosophy. A very, very easy listen, very easy read. Ryan, again, reads it himself, pretty sure. Also, go and check out The Daily Stoic. You can find it. In fact, it's everywhere. It's on YouTube, it's on Spotify. Short, 10-minute stuff every day. Stoic principles, Stoic philosophy is really good. Get the Daily Stoic book as well. That would be great as a gift for New Year. Again, 366 meditations, so, one for each day, pretty much. And an extra. Stephen Pressfield again. So I've mentioned about Stephen because that was kind of one of the big overarching books that I read every single year. But he actually wrote one before it. I think it came out before, which was The War of Art, a play on the art of war. It's motivational feeling. It half feels like something that you would hear Tony Robbins talk about or a Goggins thing. But it's not a long book. It helps overcoming procrastination. I think the tagline, in fact, I've got it here. So, The War of Art, breaking through the blocks and win your inner creative battles. Very good book. It is very motivationally in places. It's not rah-rah. But again, similar to Turning Pro, a lot of Stephen's stuff isn't particularly long. But it's very good. Very, very good. What else? One more. Let's go with Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep. I say this because we've got a sleep expert coming on in the new year, so you will hear me reference this book again, probably. I can't remember the first time I read this. It was quite some time ago. I used to think that sleep was a cousin to death, sleep was the enemy. In fact, very useful, essential to not dying, and showing up the best version of yourself each day. You need to have good sleep, you need to be well rested. So Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep, as the new science of sleep and dreams. Very, very good book to get into if you, again, along the Atomic Habits lines, trying to pick up good principles, having a good switch off time for the day, having good principles in place, sleep hygiene, how you prepare yourself for sleep. I would strongly recommend going to get that one. I think that's enough. We have gone for an hour or so straight there. It's a lot of me talking, first kind of episode that I've done this. Let me know what you think. Let me know if it was useful. If you're still listening now, either the pause button is broken, you just couldn't switch off Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. But if you thought it was useful, let me know. Good luck for 2024. Hope you have a passion that you consider turning pro on. Would love to hear about it. Get in contact with us as the podcast continues to grow. It's a surreal education. It's a real privilege to do it. It's weird, but I'm loving it, really enjoying it. So hope you've taken something from today. Hope it was useful. Thanks for dropping by. See you, folks. The Firefighters Podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our drive and purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests. And as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, tallies, and also access to all of the incredible documents that get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, then please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month, you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're in the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.